This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
Okay. Chapter 48. An offer refused, and her symbol is the Aiel spear and shields. Or spears and shield. Is that the kind of woman you like? Aviendha said contemptuously. Rand looked down at her, striding along at Jadine's stirrup, in her heavy skirts, brown shawl doubled over her head. Big blue-green eyes flashed up at him from beneath her wide headscarf, as if she wished she still had a spear the wise ones had scolded her for taking up during the Trolloc attack. Sometimes it made him uncomfortable, her walking while he rode, but he had tried walking with her, and his feet were grateful for a horse. Occasionally, very occasionally, he had managed to get her to ride behind his saddle, by complaining that he was getting a crick in his neck talking to her. Riding a horse did not exactly violate custom, it turned out, yet contempt for not using your own legs to carry you kept her afoot most of the time. One laugh from any of the Aiel, especially a maiden, even one looking the other way, was enough to have her off Jadine in a flash. She is soft, Rand al'Thor. Weak. He glanced over at the box-like white wagon, leading the peddler's train in a crooked, lurching snake across the dusty, broken landscape. Escorted by Jindo maidens again today. Isandra was up with Kadir and the driver, seated on the heavy-set peddler's lap, her chin on his shoulder, while he held a small blue silk parasol to shade her, and himself, too, from the harsh sun. Even in a white coat, Kadir continually mopped his dark face with a large handkerchief, more affected by the heat than she, in her sleek, clinging gown that matched the parasol. Rand was not close enough to be sure, but he thought her dark eyes were on him above the misty scarf wrapped about her face and head. She usually seemed to be watching him. Kadir did not appear to mind. "I do not think Isandra is soft," he said quietly, adjusting the shutha around his head. It did keep the broiling sun off after a fashion. He had resisting donning any more Aiel garb, no matter how much more suited to the climate than his red wool coat. Whatever his blood, whatever the marks on his forearms, he was not Aiel, and he would not pretend. Whatever he had to do, he could hang on to that scrap of decency. No, I would not say that. On the driver's seat of the second wagon, fat Keel? How am I saying that? Kyle?
Kylie.
Kylie?
Yeah, Kylie, like Kelly,
it.
but Kylie, yeah.
On the driver's seat of the second wagon, fat Kylie and the gleeman Natail were arguing again. Natail had the reins, though he did not drive as well as the man who usually did the job. Sometimes they looked at Rand, too, quick glances before diving back into their quarrel. But then everyone did. The long column of Jindo on the other side of him, the wise ones beyond them, with Moraine and Egwene and Lan. Among the more distant, thicker line of Shaido, he thought heads turned toward him too. It did not surprise him now any more than it ever had. He was he who comes with the dawn. Everyone wanted to know what he would do. They would find out soon enough. "Soft," Aviendha grunted. "Elaine is not soft. You belong to Elaine. You should not be caressing eyes with this milk-skinned wench." She shook her head fiercely, muttering half to herself. Our ways shock her. She could not accept them. Why should I care if she can? I want no part of this. It cannot be. If I could, I would take you Gai'Shane and give you to Elaine. Why should Isandra accept Aiel ways? The wide-eyed look she gave him was so startled he almost laughed. Immediately she scowled as if he had done something infuriating. Aiel women were surely no easier to understand than any others. "You are certainly not soft, Aviendha." She should take it for a compliment. The woman was as rough as a honing stone sometimes. "Explain to me about the roof mistress again. If Rhuarc is clan chief of the Tardad and chief of Cold Rock's hold, how is it that the hold belongs to his wife and not him?" She glowered at him a moment longer, lips working as she muttered under her breath before answering. "Because she is roof mistress, you stone-headed wetlander. A man cannot own a roof any more than he can own land. Sometimes you wetlanders sound like savages." Figured I'd leave it there.
Just a few things in there. There's a lot of Aiel sort of culture I don't feel like we really need to touch on. I do want to say that we know that Kylie is Lanfear and the Gleeman Natail is Asmodean, the Forsaken. And the reason they're just arguing over what to do about Rand, which is why they're constantly arguing. And there's a bit of a deception here because I feel like Jordan wants to make you think that Ascendra is Lanfear, and she's the one who's sort of constantly trying to get into Rand's bed. Mm-hmm. But you constantly see that Kylie is unnaturally light on her feet, and that's because she's actually a very small woman of Lanfear using the Mask of Mirrors to make herself appear large.
So she's actually in a really small body, but appears to be large.
Right.
Or a
and so
thin
that's why
body.
You'd expect her to be, she looks like she weighs a couple hundred pounds, but she actually weighs like 100 pounds. And so you see her like, obviously that has a different effect when she steps into a wagon or, walks along the ground. Like it feels different when someone of that size walks by you. And so that's something people comment on over and over and over again as a clue. Whereas Jason Tail looks just like Asmodean. There's no costume, no disguise. He's like, I put on a Gleeman's cloak. Sure, why not, I guess. But I feel like that's important because we know at this point Rand does not recognize the Forsaken's faces, which he does later.
Right. He wouldn't know what Asmodean looks like, although he would have a good idea of what Lanfear looks like, but that's because she showed him.
Right, which is why she is in disguise, is because he's met Selene, a.k.a. Lanfear, many times in her true face. She showed him both her young face and her old face. Her, natural 40-something, slowed by the power, but still, around 300 years old, versus her young face, which is the one she wore as Selene and the one he saw most often, which is someone who's more his age.
Right. And we see here after the read-in, Aviendha goes on to attempt to explain in her kind of angry way the customs of the Aiel, and she just kind of yells facts at Rand. She doesn't try to explain why or anything like that. And Rand is trying to wrap his head around, like, okay, well, if he's the chief of the clan, doesn't he, own the land? And she's like, of course not. He's like, all right, well, who does? And he's, men can't own land, you savage. And he's like, well, then tell me the freaking answer.
The women do, clearly. I don't know. He's a little dense on that one. But just cultural differences, he doesn't really get that how everything works in their society, and there's just base assumptions that they're explaining 2 levels above the base assumptions, and without sort of drilling down and having that discussion and figuring out where they actually differ on what they're thinking.
Right. This is a similar kind of separation of power where in the Two Rivers there's a women's government and a men's government. In order to truly get very much done, they more or less have to come to some kind of consensus between the two. And I feel like this is a similar kind of check. Men can have as much power in Aiel society as whatever as they can acquire, except they can never own land. Which
they always have to beg somebody to let them stay.
Right, that's a significant check on their power. You can amass a whole army, but can you feed it and house it? Not without the consent of the women around you. Rand thinks that the Wise Ones are spying on him through Aviendha, which is partly true. But, everyone's trying to figure out what he's going to do.
Yeah, but mostly I think they're just throwing Aviendha in front of him so he will see a cute girl who's also Aiel. So he'll come to love the Aiel. I honestly think she's honestly just bait.
Love the Aiel in a most literal sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I still maintain that it's both. That I think the Wise Ones are most hopeful that they put this beautiful young acolyte in front of Rand, and, two kids that age, young, attractive people, spend enough time with each other, and eventually something might happen. And I think that's very much in the heads of these older people, as well as Rand getting an education and Rand learning to respect the culture of these people who are now about to follow him. It's it's all of those things. And, whatever information they can get out of Aviendha will be helpful too.
Sure. And I think more than anything else, just when he's asleep so they can go check on his dreams.
Sure. And the reason I brought this all up is because in one line, Rand, or as the narrator, has the kind of thought that after the viperish subtleties of Tyr, the openness of the Wise Ones spying was refreshing. So, like, yeah, he knows, like, they kind of might be keeping tabs on him, but at least they're not, like, trying to murder him in his sleep, you know?
Yeah, although he does, once he realizes Aviendha lets it slip, they're spying on his dreams, he gets real fucking pissed. Like, he doesn't realize at the time that that's how they're spying on him. He thinks they're just using Aviendha. So I think it's ironic here that he's like, oh, I'm glad they're just openly spying on me with Aviendha, when in fact they're spying on his dreams every night as well.
Leia's trying to say that wise ones don't spy. They think spying is faux pas, but I mean, what does it mean when you place an advisor next to a person and then listen to everything that they come back and tell you and look into their dreams? Is that not spying? I think it's all about what you call it. Is observation spying? Are they synonyms? Yes. It's secretively paying attention. That's what spying is, right? Call it what you want.
Everyone who's not Aiel calls it spying. They'll the Aiel are like, we don't spy. In the same way that they're like, we don't use weapons. We just use these spears and stick them through people.
Yeah, we don't use weapons that kill people. We just kill people with weapons.
Right.
I suppose you could make a distinction, but...
Right. Weaver says, is it spying that you can tell that I'm just standing there watching you? If it's right out in the open? That's not really spying, it's just watching.
All right, now I feel like I have to look up the definition of spying, but I can look out my window and spy someone walking down the street. That's a correct way to use that word.
Well, and we can talk about, public privacy and how once you're in public you can sort of lose your expectation of privacy because people can spy on you at will. But then is that not spying because it's not in private?
Webster's uses the first two definitions are based on they're basically a secret observer hired by a government is the first definition of spy. But the second definition of spy is to see.
I spy with my little eye. And Aiel, ow!
The third most common definition is to search or look for.
Right, to spy around.
He thinks about Min and how she's the only woman that doesn't infuriate him constantly.
After thinking about Elaine and Aviendha, I wonder if he's setting up a bit of a relationship between the four of them. Can't imagine why.
He also notes that now Aviendha started creeping into his dreams as if Min and Elaine were not bad enough.
Mm-hmm.
Aww.
Oh, you're in love with three women. It's
cute, even though we know those dreams are X-rated.
Yeah. And we know Lanfear's watching. Oh, God, there's definitely a quote here where he talks about Aviendha and says her name right in front of Lanfear, which always gets me. I just feel like she should know who Aviendha is. She just must be so arrogant she's not paying attention.
I wanted to note that this is the first point in the book I can think of where Rand has the thought, I have to be cold and hard as steel, sharp steel. And it repeats several times in the chapter. I feel like that's kind of this is the beginning. Darth Rand the seedling is now on the scene. He's not Darth Rand for quite a while yet, but...
No, but his responsibilities are turning him into someone who can't handle his responsibilities. He's just going slowly, not insane from the power, but just insane from the pressure and the work. And I think, obviously, both those are happening at the same time, which is always confusing. But really, he is feeling
legitimate anxiety and paranoia.
Right. And I think a lot of that hardness is something that he acquires from just the pressure of the responsibilities on his shoulders, the weight of not just the world, not just the future, but the very existence of all things. Yeah. Don't fuck it up.
Right. Welcome to adulthood. Whoa.
I wonder if that's a small allegory there.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this so much in other episodes, but I'm just repeat myself. The legitimate anxiety and paranoia, like even a 100% sane person would, have every reason in the world to crack under the level of pressure and legitimate paranoia that Rand has to go through. Someone might try to kill him at any time for the rest of the series.
I crack under the pressure of running a podcast.
Right?
And that has
Like,
no consequences for anybody ever.
if we fail, everybody we love won't even know the difference unless we tell them. Like, it's
Right. They'll be like, oh, that's not going well for you anymore? Oh, that's a shame.
If Rand fails, everyone he loves won't know the difference because they will have never lived. Not even be dead. They will have never lived. They will be dead before the memories begin. It's...
Talk about breaking the wheel.
Yeah.
By the way, are you excited? Just a quick side note. Are you excited about Game of Thrones coming out? Finishing?
I mean, I'm still a little upset with Mr. Martin.
Let's put aside the fact that he doesn't write anymore.
Finished Dance with Dragons in 2011, and I'm still waiting. It's 2019.
But I am excited to have an ending to Game of Thrones.
See, I haven't been following since, I don't remember what, I watched like the first couple of seasons. Whenever it got up to where I was in the books, I was like, ooh, I should wait for the books. And then, the better half of a decade went by, and
and then I'm not crying. I'm laughing.
Forgot that I was waiting.
Right. Oh, and then they started and finished a TV series.
But people are freaking out right now that it's going to be coming to an ending and all of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's filmed, right? Like, I mean, the actors are done with it. They at least have come to an ending, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I just don't know anything that happens after Dance with Dragons. It was book 5, I think.
I think there's only really one season after book 5.
I don't know.
Oh, I love this little antecedent. Is that a word? Is it antecedent? Anecdote. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Antecedent is a word, but I think it means something that came before or something like that.
Sure. The anecdote here of the poisonous lizard that she puts her foot on and then stabs through the head.
Uh-huh.
It's like Aviendha. That's just like, I don't know why, but whenever I think of like whenever someone's like the waist and the dangerous things in the waist, that's what I always think of, is that like thing, like, just don't step on it, no problem. And then she throws it away and it like totally fades into the ground so you can't even see it.
Right, as they're
just don't step on it.
Walking along, Aviendha is partly teaching Rand about Aiel culture, but also teaching him about, lore and the land. And she's listing all these things that can kill you. And she's like, oh, here's a great example. And she leans down and stabs this thing and picks it up. And she has it speared like on her knife. She's holding it in front of his face. She says, like, if you step on this, it'll kill you, but that's easy. Just don't step on one. And she throws it into the dirt and it disappears to Rand. He's like, it's perfect camouflage. How do you not step on it?
It's almost like the waste is as dangerous as the blight.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how so many Americans think of Australia. Beautiful place filled with vicious animals that could kill you.
Australia is much more dangerous. I mean, if nothing else, we know Bambi's down there, and she's scary.
Dangerous. Watch out for that one.
Her and Neki together.
Bane and Jihad. Aviendha's creeping into Rand's dreams. Not literally, for anyone who's interpreting me wrong. Aviendha's not a dreamwalker.
Not yet. Actually, she doesn't ever really become a dreamwalker. She does use the Terran Grial occasionally to jump into Teleron Riyadh, but she's not like a natural dreamwalker.
Right, this is just a reference to Rand as dreaming about the women who occupy his thoughts. Of course, if you spend a lot of time in a day thinking about any one particular person, they start to creep into your dreams, as it were.
Even if they're just yelling at you all day. Dumb wetlander. I don't know why Moraine's white cloak caught me. I don't know. She just has this like bright white cloak that protects her from the sun. Mm-hmm. Sort of gives me a very different view of Moraine. I'm used to her being in blue instead of white.
Oh, totally. She's just picked the smart thing to do in this environment.
Because it's so hot. But that makes me wonder if that has something to do with her vision of seeing herself in a white cloak when she goes through the portal.
Oh, yeah.
If part of why she gets that cloak is because she has to see herself in that later when she takes out Lanfear. Because she has seen the future at that point. I mean, we know we've got the ter'angreal on the wagons. I think she's discovered the sa'angreal. I'm not sure if she's got that yet, but that's going to be set up. She's getting ready to take out Lanfear.
I don't know that she has the ter'angreal yet, because they get to Cold Rock's Hold, and they wait in Cold Rock's Hold for the Aiel to assemble in Al-Kardal. And then, when they're leaving, they load up a bunch of the Angreal and sa'angreal and items of power from Meridian and start bringing them toward the White Tower while they're chasing the Shido across the Dragon Wall. And that's about to commence.
But they haven't loaded them up yet?
I'm going to say no. I don't think so. Let me pull up a map really quick and look at where... Say... Leave the area of Rhuarc and start heading towards Cold Rock's Hold.
And then they go to the Golden Bowl.
Where everyone assembles. Pulling up a map here. The Shido rebel. And then everyone turns around.
Oh, so right now they're heading away from the spine of the world? Never realized that.
Yes. So right now Rhuarc is closer to the Dragon Wall than Cold Rock's Hold.
Got it.
They're basically heading, from the area kind of opposite of Cairhien. Rhuarc is not terribly far into the waste, it looks like. And Imri Stand as well.
No, it's pretty close. So they're heading east for now to get to Cold Rock's Hold.
Right. And Al-Kardal is north of there.
Okay.
I think Rhuarc in this chapter says something like just a few days travel to the north of there.
Mm-hmm. It's all pretty close. It's kind of like Canada doesn't really have, most of the people live near the border. Because,
right.
The rest of the waste is pretty desolate. So it seems like the most livable places are where you can actually trade with the Westlands. And perhaps a few places where there's streams coming down off the mountains and you have a little bit of access to water or something like that.
He does say the clan, I think this is Rhuarc that says this later, there's one clan that will take quite a while to get here. They're the furthest, and that's the Nakai, and it should take them about a month. And then one of the wise ones corrects him and says less than a month. I've spoken with the wise one and the clan chief in their dreams, and the wise one told me the clan chief plans on running the entire way. So maybe 3 weeks. But 3 weeks, at, I don't know, 50 or more miles a day. It's an incredible distance.
Yeah, when you want to call that
1,000
miles a week
or something.
Yeah, something like that.
But he basically, nobody wants to be the last to arrive, but the Nakai don't have much choice because they're far in the southeast.
Do you think, because they're so far east, do you think instead of trading with Ranland and the Westlands, they trade over the mountains with that's where they get the silk and all that kind of stuff. Basically, there's a spice road that allows goods to travel from Shara to the Westlands through the Aiel.
Yeah, I would say, of course. I would expect anyway that they'd use whatever,
He's wondering if that's the tribe that's the closest to the Sharans, who would do most of the first level trading with them.
I'm looking at the best map that I know of, and it looks like there's something called the Great Rift, which I don't know if that's supposed to be a split in the land. But if it is, that would mean the Nakai actually would have a lot of trouble getting to Shara. Whereas the Sharad and Shido would be the closest.
To trade
I don't
ports?
know what this Great Rift thing is supposed to be, though. There's not much about it in the series.
I think it's the Grand Canyon.
Probably. And Rand never goes any further than Cold Rocks, as far as I can think of.
I mean, he does do some traveling, but that's to Shan Chan.
Just the center of the Aiel Wastes is... Cold Rock's hold is close-ish. It's the north of the center, but still.
Okay, moving on. We get a lot of sort of Egwene's story from Rand's perspective, which needs a little bit of interpretation just because you're seeing it from the outside. In particular, she gets to take out her childhood braids, I think.
Oh, yeah. He sees that. He kind of sees the scene where the wise ones are finally like, you paid your penance, like you've been in timeout long enough, essentially.
We trust you to keep your word again.
And they hug and everything's cool, and he sees her taking her braids back out, which, like, he thought it was weird when she put them in, and now she's taking them out and she's excited about it, and he's like, what the hell is happening?
I don't understand, because he thinks braids are a sign of maturity, but it's the single braid of the two rivers, whereas he's like, oh, well, I guess someone must have told her she looks like a child, because, and it's like, no, she knew the whole time, she was just being shamed. It wasn't ignorance, it was literal shaming that she was going through. It's basically like, welcome to the sorority, bitch, like you're acting like a child.
You know nothing, Randall Thor.
Yeah. Oh god, I hope they use that line at some point. So in the meantime, Rand's doing the thing where he's just like practicing with this, getting better at the sword and getting better at hand-to-hand fighting, and he doesn't really have a lot of... They're just traveling, so he doesn't have a lot of, like, stuff to do.
He mentions, like, what happens kind of day by day. He gives, like, one highlight, and he's clearly, in his mind, he's keeping track of the amount of days they've been traveling, and...
Mm-hmm. He's very time-sensitive right now. He's very, like, concentrated on, like... it's like early game in Civ, where it's like every move matters because, like... everything you do early on amplifies 100 times out, and he's like starting a new game of Civ, and like he's like
the first 10 turns are way more important than the last 10 turns.
Totally. And he's like, okay, I'm starting with the Aiel. I'm going to start over in the waist, but I've got a little reserve over in Tyr. I'm just going to hold there and see if I can hold that, and then like bring my army, build it up over in the waist, and then bring it over. And he's had an unexpected rebellion, so with the Shido. That's my theory of Rand constantly thinking about time here in this first beginning part of the Shido. Is he like... Yeah,
it mentions one detail that happens each day, except kind of at the end of that sort of monologue in his head, and we see that each evening he does the same thing. Each evening he sits down, eats, and then like Lan shows up to practice the sword, and after that Rhuarc shows up to teach the spears and the Aiel's odd way of fighting with both hands and feet. The warder knew something of that, and he joined the practice sessions. And so he says, like, these are really his only friends anymore. He like hangs out with Aviendha all day by default, and then when he's finally has a little bit of time alone, he just trains in a brutal regiment every single day. This is what he does.
I'd also like to point out that Lan is also getting more badass. And it's hard to believe that Lan could get more badass, but, he's going from being vaguely familiar with hand-to-hand combat to being really good in hand-to-hand combat.
And, yeah, no, I like that you're looking at that way, because I do feel, when I see that, I not only see, like, Rand the young man and these two older veterans kind of taking him under their wing and trying to do their best for him so that he can survive and everyone can survive. But also the three of them bonding as a group. We have three very different people. Each one is very different from the next. And also...
very different cultures, yeah.
Yeah, but between the two veterans, I like that you pointed that out. I actually really never thought about it before, but that... if Lan, Rhuarc, and Rand are taking part in these practice sessions, then I bet Lan is learning from Rhuarc, and Rhuarc, in turn, is learning from Lan as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because they're both great warriors, but they both learned, very different disciplines, so I'm sure they have things to pick up from each other.
I mean, the Aiel fighting style versus the Borderlander fighting style. And it's not like they haven't fought each other before. It's not like they don't have respect. It's not like they, what was our theory? That Rhuarc was the one who came across Aniline back in the day and spared his life.
And it's very much like, I see it as like, even if they know a lot of very similar things, there's there's Thai boxing and there's English boxing, and you call both of them boxing, but they're not the same. They're not,
right,
you know, one has a lot to learn from the other, and that's why modern professional martial artists study many disciplines. Not just one.
Yeah, I think that's the most, I mean, not that I really like MMA, but one of the most interesting aspects of it is that it sort of says, well, you can take any fighting style you want and throw it in the ring, and let's see what comes out. And what you get is a lot of people who have these sort of cross disciplines, who take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and almost create a whole new fighting style. And I feel like that's perhaps what the three of them are doing, is they're like taking these fighting styles and merging them together.
It's super interesting, and it just goes to show that, yeah, every martial art probably got something right. And so, you know, if you study 4 or 5 of them, then you can learn 4 or 5 of those right things and string those together into a comprehensive style.
I almost think of it as learning more languages, right? Like it lets you be, you know, generally you're going to use one language or another, but like by learning more languages, you sort of see what they have in common, and you can sort of find what fits in the gaps in between, and that helps you like just sort of overall learn how languages work. And by training together, they learn not just like how this fighting style works or that fighting style works, but how like fighting works.
Yeah, in general, get better. But Rand has the most...
He's got the most to gain, definitely.
Right. That's the way to say it.
It's like when they give out awards at the end of a sports season, and they give out the MVP, and that's clearly Lan, but then they give out like most improved, and it's like the kid who started out like really terrible in the beginning of the season and like barely knew how to play the sport, and by the end they're like usually pretty good, if not like one of the better kids on the team, but like you're like, damn, that was all incredible journey to go through. And I feel like that's Rand, is he always gets the most improved at the end of the season.
This is totally unrelated, but I think maybe a little after that, I kind of wanted to point out that Rand observes a lot of things through this chapter as he's traveling, different kinds of plants and animals, and different way the weather acts. And, you know, he's from a temperate, warmish climate.
I see some hyenas in here.
Oh, I saw coyotes, but it could be either. He kind of observes these dog-like creatures, but they're kind of like foxes and kind of like dogs, maybe mixed together. And Rand just, you know, he's just puzzled. I saw a coyote.
Oh, coyote yeah, you're right. Coyote makes more sense.
But hyena maybe too. But I just saw like this desert animal.
Because we know there's lions, right? Because we know we saw Amis hunting lions, so we know they exist, and we know that lions and hyenas are generally coexist. So that's what made me think hyenas, as I sort of think of it as that kind of plane. But coyotes make a lot more sense in terms of the description of what
half
she actually
fox,
calls
half
them.
wolf.
Yeah.
Or that's how Rand sees it, because he knows those two animals, and he's like, well, it kind of looks like that, but it's not either. I like how RJ writes that stuff. It's fun to discover through Rand's eyes, you know. The next stuff that I have is...
lions and hyenas coexist. They don't coexist peacefully, but they do coexist.
Live in the same areas. I don't know if lions and coyotes exist in the same place, but I feel like if you removed hyenas from the equation, you could just insert coyotes. They're like they occupy a really similar place in the food chain.
Mm-hmm. The ecological hierarchy. Sort of scavenger hunter, pack hunters.
Yeah, whereas in North America, at least, you tend to have more like a black bear and coyote coexisting, or a coyote and wolf coexisting in the same area. There's some dissent and discord, and yeah, of course, when the black bear shows up, the coyotes run away, but they live in the same areas.
Yeah, they'll scavenge the same kills if they can.
Mm-hmm. In any case, the next thing that I have in this chapter are the conversations with Kadir and Natail as they separately approach Rand.
What do you think Kadir is trying to sell? Because he's trying to sell something.
I think Kadir wants out, the way I saw it. He wants immunity, is what he keeps hinting at. Like, listen, I'll sell you these really important secrets if you don't kill me.
I was curious if he had like a specific secret he was trying to sell.
I mean, maybe he knows who Kylie is. Or maybe, I mean, it could even be more mundane, and he could just be like, hey, listen, we're all dark friends, and they're going to try to kill you or capture you or whatever. Mm-hmm. Here's what the plan is. Like, get me out. I think that's what he's trying to... It's like, I've fallen in with the wrong crowd, man, and there's only one way out, and I think he might be it. But Rand is like, spy secrets from you, like, tell you that everything you've done in the past is good. Well, I don't know what you've done, man, so... No.
I also think he doesn't just want out. I think he wants to make money. I think he's greedy enough that he doesn't just want to be forgiven. He also wants to sell the information.
That was a frustrating conversation to read between Rand and Kadir. And Kadir visits him over several days, and we kind of get the highlights. And I just wanted so badly for Rand to have the wisdom to turn Kadir over to the maidens and find out what he knows. As awful as it is, boy, would that be helpful and useful.
But one of the things Rand says later on when he is fighting Asmodean and he discovers that Asmodean is actually Jason Natail, he goes, oh, I thought Kadir was Asmodean because he with his shifty eyes. And so what I think Rand is doing here is he actually thinks that, Kadir is Forsaken, and he's being deliberately obtuse in order to try and like flush him out. And I think that's part of why
try to get him
he's
to
having all these
something.
Yeah, he's like having all these frustrating conversations, and like when Jason Natail comes to him and is like, "So how you feeling?" He's like, "I will do what I must. I will do what I must." And Jason Natail's like, "No, like tell me more." And he's like, "I will do what I must." He's like, "Fine." Like I think what he's doing is deliberately like just being, his whole plan was to, he knows the Forsaken are coming after him, and he knows he needs a teacher, and so he's trying to lure them here in order to capture them. And so he's trying to figure out which one of them. Yeah, he's playing with them a little bit. He's doing what they don't expect. Personal headcanon.
No, I like it. That makes sense, especially since he talks a lot more with Kadir. How do I say this? It seems like he plays with him a little more willfully, where, the line like, I don't know that I want to buy knowledge, Rand told him more than once. There's always the question of price, isn't there? Some prices I might not want to pay. That's like a leading thing. That's not a shutdown. You know what I mean?
No, not at all. But some prices maybe I will.
It's dickering is what that is. It sounds like, Some prices I might not want to pay, so... Let's hear what your price is, and we'll start from there. It almost sounds like he's buying a used Honda. You know what I mean? What do you think it's worth? No.
No. If you can get the other guy to admit worth first, then you can anchor him down and figure out like.
Yeah, and you don't want to bid high if you're the buyer.
I think that's how I got my Subaru at such a good price. I walked in with my mom to get an oil change for her car, and we were just sort of casually looking at a car. Like, so what would you sell this for if you were selling it? I know.
I'm not interested, but
I'm not interested at all.
Think it's
I'm
worth?
Just like, yeah, totally.
He said as he casually examined his fingernails.
Yeah, and maybe the guy played me, but man, I've had that car for 15 years now.
What'd you pay for it?
$7,000.
7,000, but it would have been almost a brand new car, right? Lightly
it was
used.
It had 80,000 on it.
1,000.
And it was like a 5-year-old car at that point.
I don't know what anything retailed for 10 years ago or 15 years ago. God, 15 years.
No, it was right. No, it was definitely the price dropped. I think Subarus are cheaper on the East Coast. I think they hold their value much more on the West Coast simply because they're more in demand.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a used Subaru on the East Coast, the value drops much quicker, and you're actually able to buy it cheaper than here on the West Coast.
There's the stuff with Natail. I feel like you went over that pretty well. When Moraine comes around, he shuts her down even harder.
Yeah, he spent his time in Tyr forming a plan, and now he's sort of just implementing it, and he's not willing to listen to anybody else.
Yeah.
He's just nope, I've got a plan. Shut up. I'm going forward.
The fellow was odd, but going by Tom Maryland, so we're all gleeman. Funny, right? Because Tom's not a gleeman.
Right. I guess neither of them are, really. Well, do we ever actually meet someone who's just a gleeman? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. Nobody's a gleeman.
No, we've got court bards and Forsaken and... all sorts of people. But bards, no. Gleeman, we don't have any of those. So, just for an example, currently the car is probably worth about $3,000.
If you think about that, even if it's only worth like $1,500, the depreciation rate over 15 years, that's an incredible value. Most cars are worth $0 or less than $0 after 15 years.
And I've probably put another $10,000 into it in repairs and maintenance over the last decade and a half, but it's over a decade and a half,
Yeah, well, that's what happens.
So I always say I always got lucky with that car, right? It was my first car. I sort of bought it, not really on a whim, but on I don't really know how to buy a car. I guess I'll take this one. I don't know anything about cars. I kept it up and made sure the engine was maintained and cleaned it sometimes, not often enough, and it served me well. So, car people. We don't call them car people anymore. We call them transformers. Car people is an antiquated term.
We see Aviendha learn how to control her connection to the power. I feel like that's when she launches the fireball, that's the moment.
Yeah. I like how a bunch of other people are like, I made a little fire. I made a little flame, a candle flame. How cute. Aviendha's like, I threw a fireball. Oops.
But the women seem all very happy and they're all kind of congratulating her. And I feel like that's meant to represent the first moment that Aviendha reliably controls herself. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, she's always had the potential to channel, but she has never done it up until this point when they've finally said, no, it's time. You need to stand with us. We're going to teach you how to channel.
Right.
We're going to teach you how to touch. And it hasn't been that long. So I think that, yeah, honestly, that was the first time she touched the power, and she just got this massive surge and released it in a fireball.
Yeah. As we see, all the details that I kind of mentioned earlier, that we get nice little quick bullet points as Rand is traveling. He notices the plants, the animals, he develops these relationships with people, and he also observes right before that he's thinking that Aviendha spends her nights with the wise ones. She wakes up in the morning. She often walks with them for several hours. So Aviendha goes to bed, wakes up, dark and early, goes to her lessons that she's at for probably longer than Rand is even aware of, and then she immediately reports to Rand and spends the entire day traveling with him. To when she goes home, reports to the wise ones, probably does more lessons, and is sent right to bed. So she's being brutalized right now.
You missed the chores that she has to do in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. So this one morning when she randomly launches a giant fireball, she's been working at this for a long time, for weeks.
That's my assumption.
They've been training her and working with her.
I doubt they use the rosebud technique, but they've been basically trying to teach her to open herself up to the source, is my headcanon.
Yeah, right. And they're wise ones, so they're probably just beating her until she gets it right. Or, I'm sure it's the most brutal derivative of, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Beatings will continue until morale improves. Very, very wise one. I also noticed that where Natail is spending his nights is pretty important here. He stops spending them with the Jindo and spends them all with the Shido, perhaps meeting a certain Couladin and preparing him with tattoos.
Yep.
So I think at this point is when Couladin gets his. I speculated before. And been wrong, but I'm 99.9% sure that this time is when Couladin gets his tattoos from.
Well, remember a while back, there's the meeting, or we see the meeting between, what is it, Couladin and Kadir?
Yeah,
and then Natail starts hanging out in the camp, in the Shido camp, a lot more, although the other Dark Friends don't, and they're like, oh, this Couladin guy, we should do business with him. And then they send Natail over there to...
So here's my question.
Yeah, go for it.
And I've asked this before, but Couladin, stooge, dark friend?
I think power-hungry stooge.
Okay.
I don't think he's a dark friend, even though he does end up working with the Forsaken and a lot of Friends of the Dark. I think that he's just a ambitious and dripping venomous, vicious human being who is just exploited by the shadow.
Oh, you make him sound so cute and cuddly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like someone that's money hungry is not necessarily evil, but maybe they end up doing evil things and making deals with evil people because they're just so money and power hungry. They don't care about the consequences or who they're dealing with or who they have to employ. They just want what they want. I see Couladin that way.
He's the Elida of the Aiel.
Yes. Exactly, actually.
Oh, Rand freaks out a little bit because he like reached for the power when Aviendha tossed the fireball and like he couldn't find it and he's like, oh crap, we're under attack and I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
And so this is, reiterating the fact that like he needs a teacher desperately, or he's gonna like really fucking come to a point where it's gonna be channel or die, and he's gonna fail to channel and he's gonna die.
Right, and what if he had succeeded and grabbed the power and accidentally attacked the Wise Ones or their general vicinity because he thought he was under attack when he wasn't?
Or what if he like couldn't control it once it got started, or what if he burned himself out because he panicked? That's just as likely as not being able to seize the source.
Right, any of those things. Killing literally everyone there, thousands of people, is a possibility.
Here's some toxic waste. Have fun. Wait, can you train me how to use this, please?
No one can.
No.
Bye.
Don't kill yourself. Figure it out. Matt's avoiding him.
See the conversations with Matt? I don't really have anything about that.
Only that Matt's like avoiding him because he doesn't want to talk about what happened in Rhuarc. He doesn't want to admit that he's earned these things. He doesn't want to admit that he's got the memories. He doesn't want to admit he won't let anybody heal him when he picks some flowers. He's also, I noticed he's like trying to court Ascendra, and it's like,
well, she's a very attractive lady, and so of course Matt's like immediately, oh hey, what's up? But Isandra has orders on who to seduce, so,
and it's not Matt.
Nope.
Then
we see a kind of weird. Kylie talks to Matt and Rand for a minute. So, Lanfear.
Mm-hmm. Neither of them heard Kylie approach, so light on her feet, despite her size.
Lanfear, jokingly or not jokingly, I don't know what she's doing in this scene. I really don't understand her motivation or what she's trying to do. But she sees, like, Matt trying to flirt with Isandra or whatever. And walks up to them, and she's like, oh, Matcham Cawthon, do you like her? I'll sell her to you for 1 gold mark. Or whatever. Or one Tarvalin gold mark. And Matt's like, because that's just a really weird thing to say.
I think she's just trying to insult Isandra. She's basically calling her a whore, and that she's not worth more than a gold mark to her, anybody.
Yeah.
I think she just finds her deplorable, especially because she's trying to seduce Rand, and of course, Lanfear is fucking pissed at anyone who tries to
just straight up
Rand.
jealousy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all I think it is. I think it's just straight up jealousy and cattiness.
No, that puts it together a lot better for me, actually. And then Matt, I think, just doesn't respond, and then she goes on her Lanfear regular monologue that we hear all the time. No matter what form ever refused an offer from me once, much less twice. You should have a care. I do not take in mind to do something about it. She says as she walks away. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a weird scene.
Well, and the last time we saw her make that offer was in the White Tower when she approaches him.
I suppose, yeah, it is also kind of a hint drop. Like, not many men have survived to refuse me once, much less twice, meaning that he's, refused her before. And Matt doesn't figure out what's going on, but it's a hint to all of us.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you go back and look at her dialogue in the White Tower, you can see that she talks about few men. She says, "Few men refuse an offer from me," and so like this, and then he refuses her offer and sneaks out of the White Tower and escapes. And so this is her being like, "Well, you refuse once, much less twice."
Yeah, you should have a care. I do not take it in mind to do something about it.
Okay, and then right after that, I have a feeling you know something of the dangers of scorning a woman, she says to Rand. That Aiel girl who follows you about glaring, I hear you belong to another. Perhaps she feels scorned. I doubt it, mistress, he said dryly. Aviendha, would plant a knife in my ribs if she believed I have thought of her that way. All right, right there.
The immense woman laughed uproariously.
We have Rand telling Lanfear who Aviendha is. So there's that scene later in the docks when she bursts out and goes, "Who is Aviendha?" I just always felt that was a plot hole. Like, she should know. She's been spying. She's been hanging out with them for weeks now. And she's been watching this Aiel girl fawn over Rand. Of course she would figure out her name. Even if she thought, like, it wasn't a serious contender, she'd know who she was. Anyway. That's a little plot hole that bothers me. Because I love that scene so much, but then it's like, but she was Kylie the whole time.
I thought this was also about, because what she says right after that is, well, at first she says, what you just said, "Tell him, my lord dragon, I have a feeling you know something of the dangers of scorning a woman." And he says, "I doubt it, mistress." And then she says, "You see, good sir," to Matt. I think she's talking to Matt. "You see, good sir, scorn a woman's offer, and perhaps she thinks nothing of it. But perhaps," she made a skewering motion, "the knife, a lesson any man can learn."
Oh, that's Lanfear to a heartbeat.
Yeah.
She might be okay with it. She might kill you.
Matt muttered, "They're all crazy," before he too left. He did not abandon his pursuit of Isandra, though. How real is that?
Give it up for a lost cause, man. Give it up for... Well, we talk a lot about how Matt only pursues women who want to be pursued. And Isandra certainly wants to be pursued, but not by Matt. She's hoping to catch the bigger fish.
Right. So it went, for 11 days and into the 12th, across a barren, hard-baked land. Twice they saw other stands, small, rough stone buildings much like Imri Stand, sited for easy defense against the sheer side of a spire or butte. One had 300 sheep or more, and men who were as startled to learn of Rand as they were of Trollocs in the Threefold Land. The other was empty, not raided, only not in use. Several times Rand spotted goats or sheep or pale long-horned cattle in the distance. Aviendha said herds belonged to nearby sept holds, but he saw no people, surely no structure that deserved the name hold. The 12th day, with thick columns of Jindo and Shido flanking the Wise Ones' party, the peddlers' wagons lurching along with Kylie and Natail arguing, and Isandra eyeing Rand from Kadir's lap. "And that is how it is," Aviendha said, nodding to herself. "Surely you must understand about a roof mistress now." "Not really," Rand admitted. He realized that for some time he had just been listening to the sound of her voice, not to the words. "I'm sure it works just fine, though," she growled at him. "When you marry," she said in a tight voice, "with the dragons on your arms proving your blood, will you follow that blood, or will you demand to own everything but the dress your wife stands in like some wetland savage?" "That's not at all the way it is," he protested, "and any woman where I come from would brain a man who thought it was. Anyway, don't you think that ought to be settled between me and whoever I do decide to marry?" If anything, she scowled harder than before. To his relief, Rhuarc came trotting back from the head of the Jindo. "We are here," the Aielman announced with a smile. "Cold Rock's hold."
Yep. Yeah, I guess the only one thing I really want to point out there is it takes 12 days to travel from Rhuarc to Cold Rock's hold.
12 days at the speed of the slowest donkey, I suppose. However fast they can pull those wagons.
I imagine it's not super fast, but faster than any equivalent group of people could make it.
I would think so, yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?